So when we talk about Form 2441, I want you to look at this pro tips. First of all, I want to show you how the form looks like. So basically on the screen right now, you have Form 2441, so child and dependent care expenses. And so you got to put your first name, last name, first name, last name. You got to put your social security number. So part one and part two are pretty straightforward in terms of how you can claim the child and dependent care expenses on your tax returns. So line A here, fantastic. We checked that box because it made sense in our hypothetical example. Line two is pretty straightforward as well. I want to move real quick to part one. So part one is actually about the persons or organizations who provided the care. So we're speaking about if you have a child care agency or some kind of organization. So in our hypothetical example here, we have three agencies, three institutions, if you will. So you got to put for every agency or every organization, you have to put the address, you have to put their EIN, their employer identification number, and you have to also indicate the amount that you paid to the organization throughout the year, throughout the last 12 months. One thing I want to see here is that we are speaking about net amount, not gross amount, net amount, okay? And please make sure that you have your receipts ready, not a problem. So that's for part one. Part two here, I want you to look on the screen here. So part two relates to the children that you are going to claim on your taxes. So in our hypothetical example here, we have three children. So you have for every child, you have to put the first name, last name, and you have to put the child's social security number, in addition to the amount you spent on the child. Okay, so here we have a 2,500, 3,000, and 4,500. And then you follow the math all the way to the bottom. So line three, you put 6,000 because we have more than two children. So here, the maximum you can actually put here is 6,000. And line four here, you have to put your earned income, so $50,000. And so basically, in line five, if we follow the math, we have 40,000. And so all the way through line eight, you have to actually put the decimal that corresponds to what's available on line seven, 45,000. So that's 0.20. And so all the way to the bottom, we have line 11 here. It's showing $1,000 because 20% of 6,000 is 1,200, and so that's 1,000 at the bottom because 1,000 is lower than 1,200. And I want to show you real quick here when we talk about on the next screen you have line 11. When we talk about line 11, form 1040, that's your AGI, your adjusted gross income. And then the next thing I want to show you here is the worksheet for the child care expenses that really gave us the amount that we had on the form. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. I want to show you part three, but part three is it's actually FYI because part three does not apply to our hypothetical example. But one thing I want to say here is that if you have questions about part three, please let us know in the comment section, and one of our team members will get back to you, explain things for you further. But part three really is about the dependent care benefit. In other words, if you got reimbursed for your dependent care benefit throughout the year, and you want to really sort of have some kind of adjustments when you file your taxes, it's totally possible to indicate the amounts here. Just remember that the IRS is not going to give you credit for care benefits that you already got reimbursed for. So this is applicable for parents or for professionals in general who got reimbursed or who through some kind of arrangements got reimbursed for their dependent care expenses throughout the year. So if you follow the math from line 12 all the way through line 26, you basically have to put it the right amount. Again, one thing I want to say here is that when you have more than two children, the maximum you can claim here is 6,000. So you are not going to have more than 6,000 here. So just keep that in mind when you do your math or when you do your taxes, okay? But so here we have a constellation of, let's say, metrics that relates to your AGI, your adjusted gross income, your earned income, and also something called qualified expenses. Now, I want to go back to qualified expenses. Qualified expenses relate to qualified persons. In other words, the children you are going to claim on your taxes this year must qualify. So, and the IRS has a set of criteria that really will institute whether or not a child is a qualified person, okay? And the next screenshot I want to show you here, this is actually goes to the bottom. So line 27 all the way to the line 31. You just got to follow the math. It's pretty straightforward. But again, everything revolves around the fact that you have to actually justify the amount that you are claiming. And the best way to justify those amounts is to actually keep receipts. So those could be paper receipts or electronic receipts. So very important, because when you do not want to get audited on your form 2441, the IRS is pretty adamant at making sure that people actually follow the rules when it comes to complying with form 2541. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about form 2441, what it is and how to fill it out. I want to talk to you about the approach here. When we talk about Form 2441, Child and Dependent Care Expenses, you really have to understand what that form is all about. Now, the form actually provides you, gives you a layout to have to indicate the amount you spend on your children throughout the year, especially when it comes to care expenses. And again, we are speaking about not only organizations who provided the care, but also persons, it's professionals. So we're speaking about babysitters, we're talking about nannies, anybody who is coming to your house. And again, when you actually pay those people or that person, you have to report the payments to the IRS, and also make sure that you are paying, in some cases, self-employment taxes on the wages that you are giving to that person. Very important. Okay, the whole idea here is it's all about transparency. We are talking about transparency, and when it comes to the tax calculation and also the credit calculation, there is an entire worksheet that will help you actually get the job done. But the bottom line here is that with the Form 2441, I think I've said this before, it's all about transparency. Now, the IRS is really willing to give you credit, child care credit for the expenses that really qualify, but you have to justify those expenses, and you also have to back up any claim that you have. One thing I also want to say here is that if you pay multiple people or multiple institutions, please, you want to really tally all the amounts, and you want to keep a proper record of the payments that you made, but also the timing of those payments, because in some cases the notion of qualifying children actually can relate to a quarter, can relate to a 6 month period, can relate to an entire year. And the calculations are sometimes different depending upon the timing that we're speaking about. One last thing I want to say here is that if your taxes are quote unquote complex, it's just a lot better to have a CPA or an EA or a tax attorney take a look at your situation, because what we're giving you here, we're giving you sort of general information. But if you want to go a little in depth, you can let us know in the comment section, or you can actually just enlist the help of a tax professional to kind of help you out. Let's talk about who is eligible to file tax form 2441. This is important. Now, the thing here is that this form is filed by individuals who have incurred qualifying child and dependent care expenses and wish to claim the related tax credit. Now, I want to insist on the fact that we are speaking about qualifying child and dependent care expenses. So the child must be qualified. Okay. Now, the form is typically filed by taxpayers in the U.S. who have paid for the care of a child or dependent while they were working or looking for work. So again, we are speaking here about child or dependent. So you can have an adult, but if that adult happened to be your dependent throughout the year, then if that adult also qualified according to the IRS rules, then you are good to go. So to be eligible to file Form 2441, you must meet actually certain criteria. So for instance, you must have incurred qualifying expenses for the care of a child under the age of 13 or a disabled dependent of any age. You must have earned an income during the tax year. So when we speak about you actually qualifying for the credit, you actually have to have income. You can't really, this is not a refundable credit. You got to have income to back it up, okay? So when we talk about income, we are speaking here about wages, salaries, tips, self-employment income, or other taxable compensation, depending upon your situation. But sorry about that. Going back to what I said about transparency, make sure that you have Let me drink some water here. All right, so I was actually talking about income, and we are speaking about all kinds of income. So this is important to really document your income, right? So the second criterion is pretty straightforward. The third criterion here is that you must have paid for child or dependent care services so that you could work or actively look for work. And there are exceptions for full-time students or individuals who are unable to care for themselves. Again, the IRS will take a look on a case-by-case basis here. And the fourth criterion here is that you must have identified the care providers by providing their name, address, and taxpayer identification number. So simply saying that you actually paid someone to actually take care of your child or dependent is not really sufficient. You have to provide the social security number of that person or the EIN of the institution. So this is kind of important. Again, going back to what I said about transparency, okay? And when we talk about tax form 2441, you have a form that actually that has several benefits. You basically you are able to have a significant tax benefits. Okay, you are able to have a tax reduction. You have eligible expenses that really are pretty flexible. You have a work-related expense deduction, and you have financial relief in some cases. So, long story short, pretty straightforward, pretty interesting deduction that you could qualify for. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 2441. I want to talk to you about the steps here. So when we talk about Form 2441, previously I showed you what the form looks like, but it's important to really have a clear idea about the steps you need to really take if you want to fill out this form real fast. Okay. First of all, you want to gather the necessary information. This is kind of important. So basically, we're speaking here about your personal information, your name, address, your social security number, always important. And if applicable, information about your spouse. So if you provided the care, the expenses with your spouse throughout the year, then you want to have information for your spouse also. And you also want to have information about the child or dependent care provider. We're speaking here about name, address, and EIN or social, right? As I said before. So step number 2, you want to download or obtain Form 2441. Everything happens on the IRS website. So you can go to the IRS website and get that info. And you have to provide your personal information. So again, we're speaking about the basics that you know already, your name, address, and social. And you have to provide the care. You have to calculate care expenses. So if you remember, I actually had to delineate. I had to sort of clarify the expenses that I really I'm actually applying for the children that I'm actually citing on my form. So calculate care expenses. You need to determine the applicable limits because there are limits for those expenses. You need to calculate the credit. You need to transfer the credit amount. So again, the credit really everything happens on the worksheet that I showed you earlier. So and then once you have the credit, you need to transfer the credit amount. And so the bottom line here is that again, going back to what I said about transparency, you may need to attach supporting documents if required. So depending on your circumstances, you may need to attach additional documents to support your claims, such as receipts or statements from the care providers. And again, those receipts or statements may be paper-based or electronic, not a problem. So once you do everything, you have just review everything. If everything is fine, you can submit, not a problem, okay? But again, it's always better if you have a quote-unquote a complex tax situation to actually enlist the help of a professional to kind of help you out. This will be really helpful down the road. Talk to you about the types, the schedules, the deductions that really apply to Form 2441, okay? And one thing I want to say here is that when we talk about this Form 2441, the expenses are pretty straightforward. So we are speaking about expenses incurred for the care of a qualifying individual. Again, the qualifying individual, that notion is pretty flexible because here we are speaking about payments made to child care centers, babysitters, nannies, day camps, and similar providers, and expenses for overnight camps or schooling costs are not eligible. So this is something that you might have to be eligible to write off those expenses on in other sections, but not here. Okay. So when we talk about this Form 2441. You are having two parts. I showed you the parts before, part 1 and part 2, right? So part 1 is pretty straightforward. It's actually used to calculate the allowable expenses and credit for the care of one qualified individual or two or more qualified individuals. But remember, when we talk about two or more qualified individuals, the maximum you can claim here is $6,000. Okay, so if you have if you have 10 children, the maximum here is $6,000. And when we talk about part two really it's about the care providers. So the name, the address, the taxpayer identification number. Okay, and then what happens here is that you are going to actually identify the care providers, and again by social security number or EIN. And don't forget that we are always in the spirit of transparency. You may need to attach receipts or statements from those care providers. And in terms of filing deadlines and extensions on for this form, we're speaking about it's usually the April 15th. So April 15th, that's the basic. That's the same time you have to file your form 1040. So it's there's no change here. And if you need more time to file your tax returns for form 2441, the extension deadline is generally October 15th. So the IRS gives you 6 months automatically. You just have to file the amendments, and the amendments, the extension is granted automatically. So when we talk about Form 2441 in terms of filing that tax form, you have all capabilities. You have you have several ways to file this form depending on your situation. One thing I want to say here is that you are able to do offline paper filing, not a problem. So you can just do the things manually, and again, then if that's the case, you follow the process through snail mail. That's not a problem. Or you can do online filing. So online filing, you can use a tax preparation software such as H&R Block. You can use a Tax Slayer. You can use TurboTax or whatever. So this is totally fine. And so you can submit your return that way, not a problem also. And or you can do e-filing. So basically, the IRS has partnerships with a series of e-file providers, and you can actually just identify one. But for that, you have to go to the IRS website to have an updated list of the e-file providers that the IRS is currently partnering with this year. Okay, so basically you have flexibility when it comes to filing Form 2441. And there are some mistakes that I really want to talk to you about when it comes to filing this Form 2441. Please make sure that you do not put incorrect or missing information. I mean, and also there are some cases where there are some ineligible expenses, okay? Because the thing is, as I said earlier, anything about night care for the child does not qualify. And also incorrect calculations could be a problem also. So please double check your math. Well, if you are filing electronically, the software is actually taking care of everything for you. So you don't have to really worry about anything. This is kind of fine. And please also make sure that you provide the care provider's information. So when we're speaking about the care provider, this can be a person, the nanny, the babysitter, or this could be an organization. Anybody who provided the care, you have to provide their social security number or EIN. And also make sure that you are filing under the right status, because there are some cases where if you are married, for instance, ensure that you are filing your tax return using the correct filing status, okay? And it's one of those things where the IRS will check that to make sure that everything is accurate. And the bottom line here is that when we talk about filing Form 2441, in the spirit of transparency, we want to keep all the tax forms, all the documents, all the receipts, everything that really can help you actually back up, can really help you substantiate the claims you are having on your tax form 2441. Very important. So if you're listening to me right now, you are thinking about filing this form at some point, please make sure that you are keeping the receipts. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let me do a quick recap here. So into this conversation, I spoke to you about Form 2441. So I give you the pro tips, the approach, the steps, and now the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay Marvelous.